So HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testified before the Senate Finance Committee today. It went about as you would expect. This was one of my favorite exchanges.
I told her I didn't want her to have a rule that she's not going to sign on to it.
Did you say that the CDC was, quote, the most corrupt federal agency in the history of the world?
Not the history of the world.
And then there was this.
You went on Fox News blaming school shootings on antidepressants. You have no evidence of that because you have no evidence of a connection. And you want to talk about...
You're just saying something. You're just making stuff up.
You know, this is what you say, right? Secretary Kennedy, when someone presents you with information that does not fit...
I did not blame that shooting. I have no idea whether... I have no idea, and I never said that.
It's little wonder that people have lost confidence in the health leadership in the United States because of people like RFK Jr. who are putting conspiracy theories ahead of the science. But let's step back for a moment and look at what's been happening at the CDC over the last month. So this is Susan Menares. Susan Menares is a Trump-appointed, or was a Trump-appointed, head of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. She is a microbiologist and a scientist who has deep experience and was asked to lead this agency. She was praised at the time that she was nominated by Trump. So why was Menares forced out? Well, let's go back to June when RFK Jr. fires all 17 of the members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at CDC. So these are experienced people that were on this commission to analyze what kind of vaccines should be given, what are safe, what are not safe. And so he fires them all, and he replaces them with a bunch of people who have history in anti-vaxxer conspiracy theories. And so in a meeting recently with Susan Menares before she gets fired, RFK Jr. demands that she rubber stamp whatever this group, including these conspiracy-minded anti-vaxxers, whatever they recommend. Now, as a scientist, Menares says no, she's not going to approve a recommendation by people that's not based on science. Well, that was all it took to get her fired. So now we have these people on the commission that we can't trust. The CDC's director with experience as microbiologist, Susan Menares, is gone, and she's been replaced by a guy named Jim O'Neill. This is Jim O'Neill. So Jim O'Neill's now running the CDC. What's Jim O'Neill's experience as a scientist? Zero. He's not a scientist. What's his experience in health? Is he a health policy expert? No experience as a health policy expert either. He's essentially an experienced investor who works with a conservative billionaire named Peter Thiel. But more to the point, he's a long-time friend, confidant of RFK Jr. So RFK Jr. is installing a political hack to run the CDC. Now, when Menares was forced out, we didn't just lose her experience. We didn't just lose an independent scientific voice leading the CDC, but other top leadership of the CDC quit also. They weren't going to go along with policies that weren't based on science, that were based on conspiratorial thinking or political ideology. So in addition to losing Menares, we also lost Dr. Deb Houry, a very experienced scientist who also quit the leadership at the top of the CDC. And we also lost Dr. Dimitri Daskalaskis, another top scientist at the CDC. And we lost Dr. Dan Jurgen, another top leader at the CDC. So 4 of the top leadership of the CDC are gone. The CDC is now rudderless. In fact, there were a number of former CDC directors going all the way back to Carter through Trump 1, who wrote an op-ed talking about how this is so dangerous, so unprecedented, that essentially they're breeding distrust in the premier, the gold standard scientific health agency, the CDC. This has never happened before. Those former CDC directors of both parties, appointed by presidents of both parties, are sounding the alarm. And here's one of the other repercussions. This new advisory committee, made up of, among others, these conspiratorial anti-vaxxers, are going to be making recommendations about the COVID vaccine. They're going to be making recommendations about measles vaccinations. We are experiencing, tragically, a resurgence of measles unlike anything we've seen in 30 years. whether it's the rubella vaccine or other vaccines, we are now going to have a CDC panel making recommendations that the American people cannot trust. And sadly, we're also disinvesting in some of the most promising vaccine technologies and capabilities, like the mRNA vaccine. That vaccine saved millions of lives during COVID, but RFK Jr. recently announced that he was cutting $500 million out of that kind of vaccine research, mRNA vaccine research. And why? Because of conspiracy theories, because of false claims that it wasn't effective. It was effective. It saved millions of lives. Essentially, we are taking the U.S. backward. The CDC, not only respected by Americans as the gold standard, but respected all over the world. People from all over the world, science agencies from all over the world, health agencies from all over the world, look to the CDC. They can no longer do that. Now, interestingly, and I think importantly, in the west of the United States, California, Oregon, and Washington have decided that if the CDC is going to step down from its leadership role, that they will need to step up and form their own vaccine immunization practices advisory committee. So these three Western states now are going to pool some of the best science and make recommendations, not just for our three states, but also for the country, so that families will know what is safe and what isn't, what is recommended and what isn't. Because the decisions coming out of this administration, for example, changes they've made to COVID policy, which means that if you're under 65, they're not going to recommend a COVID vaccine for you no matter what the science recommends, no matter whether you live with someone who is immune compromised. It means that for you to get that vaccine will be more difficult and more expensive, and that is going to be true for millions of people. But in California, Oregon, and Washington, we're going to make sure that you get good recommendations on vaccination based on good, sound science. So sadly, under this administration and under the ill leadership, the malpractice of RFK Jr., your health has been put at risk. But we're going to have to do everything we can to overcome these challenges, and I'm glad to see that some of the states are stepping forward, exercising very necessary leadership to protect the public health when our own federal government refuses to do so.